Welcome back, spooky ones. I know it's been a little while. I got a new piercing and everything. This is Gothic Undone, and I have come back to actually being on camera. I'm back on camera again. I've also changed up my intro again, but hey, who cares? You know, there's only a few of us watching, and I do this for fun. So today, though, we will be talking about something that I love and is a favorite of mine. So after a quick introduction, we will get into it. So like I said, we are getting into one of my favorite topics, and this is horror movie tropes. The good, the bad, and the ugly of the typical horror movie tropes. So what I'm going to be talking about is something that was done brilliantly by Joss Whedon, who also did Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I'm also a very big fan of. And what I loved was Cabin in the Woods. Cabin in the Woods perfectly highlights the horror movie tropes, okay? And it talks about it in such a way that it makes you want to go back and kind of look at horror movies if you haven't noticed these things already, and look at them and be like, oh yeah, that is exactly what happens. Now, as somebody who's been a horror fan since a very young age, and then went off them for a little while because I got scared, and then got back into them at the age of 13, when Scream was at its hype, okay? Revealing my age, 255. So in that movie itself, Randy, one of the characters that we see here, who has like a crush on Sydney, but he goes and explains the horror movie tropes and the do's and don'ts of horror movies. So of course he does this when Stu, who turns out, if you haven't seen Scream by now, spoiler alert, turns out to be one of the killers in the original OG Scream, which is the only good one in my opinion. Sorry if people like the other ones, but no. Anyway, he does this thing where he gets up because he's going to go get some more beer, and he's like, I'll be right back. And Randy then gets into his whole rants because he works in a video store, and this is when video stores were a thing. I know, weird, right? And he gets into it and he's like, no, you can't say that. You know, that's like one of the no-nos. It's like, also like, the only way you're going to survive a horror movie is by being a virgin. Okay, so you have the virgin character. By not doing drugs, not drinking alcohol, not being alone. And I think the other one he says is, and never saying, I'll be right back. And that's when Stu does, which obviously when you find out at the end, you're like, yeah, no wonder he didn't give a crap. But that horror movies for a long time did follow that trope. If we look at the horror movies like the greats, the OGs from the 70s, the 80s and the early 90s, and some decent ones from the early 2000s, even though they were all quite samey. But Freddy, obviously Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy's New Nightmare, and you've got Halloween, Friday the 13th, you've got Psycho. These are like only some of the classics, right? If you want to go way back, you know, to Hitchcock, depending on how much of a fan you are, those are more cinematic. Same with The Shining, it's more of a cinematic, and it's obviously a story derived from a book by Stephen King. But if we go into the horror movie tropes, which became more popular in the, I'd say, later 80s, 90s and early 2000s, this is when it was a situation where you got to be a virgin, no drugs, no alcohol. And obviously it was, again, this racist trope where they would have a quote unquote token. Now, I'm using that term because that was a term that was used, not because it's a term I use today, or ever, but it's what they used, person of colour, which they even did in Cabin in the Woods to show you the typical horror movie tropes of the time, okay? So you got your horror movie tropes, you've got, so your person of colour, your dumb blonde who's going out with the dumb jock, your virgin, your intelligent character who's a bit geeky, and then your extremely intelligent character who's kind of out there, a little bit wacky, maybe likes a toke or two, but has like crazy knowledge about everything scary and weird. And you're kind of like, okay, you have a lot of knowledge about that for what reason? But then he always ends up coming in handy. But you can't survive unless you haven't partaken in any of the drugs or the alcohol, or, you know, you got to be a virgin. Otherwise, you ain't going to make it, honey. That's how it worked. And it was like that in Halloween, in the first one. You know, Jamie Lee Curtis' character, you know. And it was like that with Friday the 13th. Anyone that was... And in Friday the 13th, the first one, Kevin Bacon's in it, which is super weird. And in Nightmare on Elm Street, the first one, you got your young Johnny Depp in it. And, you know, who doesn't love that picture, you know? I think men should wear crop tops more often, personally. So you've got those, which I love. I love the tropes. I love this, that they had that. What obviously I don't love is the token character in the sense of a person of colour, because I think that's just fucking ridiculous, quite frankly. Pardon my language, but it is ridiculous. So taking that out, the rest is so nostalgic. I do like that horror movies are more diverse now, and that obviously they've come a long way. And when obviously it changed is when we had the found footage come in. When found footage came in, a lot changed. And that all started with, of course, the Blair Witch Project. And when the Blair Witch Project came in, that's when people started to really pay attention to this new genre. I personally remember going to watch the Blair Witch Project. And when I did, I remember they had this thing on the screen saying, if you suffer from motion sickness, you know, kind of maybe don't watch this movie, or be careful, or have a sick bag or whatever. And I was, again, very young, teens, technically shouldn't have been allowed in the cinema. But I was like, what are they talking about? And then, of course, it was a lot of the running with the camera and all that stuff. And didn't bother me then, does bother me now. Too much running with the camera is very annoying. But obviously, they've switched that up a little bit now. But again, it's all based on Blair Witch. What they do is you've got this group going out to investigate a place that's rumoured to be haunted, and it's done documentary style. It's meant to be real. Like even with the Gangnam Asylum, I think I'm saying that right, or Gojam. I'm so sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. My pronunciation is not great, so I'm sorry. But yeah, that was a great movie. Like, I enjoyed watching it, and I really enjoyed the fact that in that movie they are a YouTube channel and they want to get to 1 million views, and they are doing it live. And there's most of the actual participants don't know, only 2 of them know, and the main guy who is actually in the tent doing the editing knows, is that they've rigged certain things to be haunted. But then it turns out to being legit haunted, and nobody comes out of that. Spoiler. I did like the way they did it, because, you know, there were this whole YouTube channel thing and rare. But I also, moving away slightly from found footage, but not really, is the kind of POV. I really enjoy how horror movies have moved into, and again, they have their tropes, but they've moved into the whole, like, from a Zoom perspective, which obviously became popular, like Zoom meetings, Microsoft Team, you meet up with your friends, which obviously became popular during 2020 when, you know, the panini happened and nobody could go out and do anything. So people would have your virtual meetups, right? And they would schedule those. So a few people had the brilliant idea of going, well, let's do horror movies like that. If we can't actually film, let's do horror movies like that. And some TV shows were done that way as well. One of my favorites is The Host. That one, it must have been like so cheap to make, I imagine. I haven't looked into it, but I imagine it must have been so cheap to make. View up there, that's what they made from it as well. So, I imagine that they had a lot of fun with that, to be honest, because I've watched it about 3 times and I still enjoy it. It does give an eerie vibe. And with Host, I think what I liked about it, like I said, it did set eerie vibes, with the fact that they were basically doing an online seance. And you could see that they were friends from like uni, and there was some tension between some of the characters. And it felt very much like you were watching or you were part of this, Zoom meeting, friend catch up. And then, of course, everything goes, to crap. But I enjoyed that one. The other one I enjoyed, which again is done around the same time, same kind of style, is Friend Request. That was another one I enjoyed. The ending didn't really do it for me, but you see, what I'm getting at essentially is as a horror fan, which I think is obvious by now, as a horror fan, what I like is as we go through the tropes, there's always an OG, and then there's always a trope that it follows. So as we mentioned with the old school tropes, okay, of the do's and the don'ts that have been pointed out in a few different movies, not just Scream, but obviously, and then taken the mick out of in Cabin in the Woods by Joss Whedon himself, which actually comes under a comedy genre more than it does a horror when you look it up, which is just strange in itself. I think it should be comedy horror, but whatever. Then we've moved on. So you've got your POV, you've got your actually like on your computer host meeting, you've got your found footage, but they all follow that similar trope. Same with Hell House was another one, but I love the Hell House franchise. Actually, the most recent one, the Carlisle house itself, I personally really like that one. And again, it's a found footage, documentary style, what's it called? Movie. That's what it's called. It's called a movie. I'm so clever today. So they follow that style of, they're going to investigate something in a place that's rumoured to be haunted or rumoured or had terrible things happen there. It may not be rumoured to be haunted, but it's had terrible things happen there. And they obviously record it for whatever reason, whether they're a journalist or they are doing a documentary or they're doing it for YouTube. There's another one called Superhost, which is about Airbnb. That's a really good one to watch. I really enjoyed that one as well. It had a kind of twist, which, to be honest, it wasn't really a twist. Like, if you watch as many horror movies as I have, you're kind of like, I can see what's coming here. But if you're maybe newer to the horror game, then you're like, okay, I didn't think it was going there. But there was one twist that I didn't see, which is unusual for me, because with the old ADHD brain, I recognize patterns very quickly. I'm very annoying to watch movies with, because I'll be like, this is going to happen. And then whoever I'm with is like, why did we bother coming here then? So I'm not one to watch movies with, if I'm honest, even if I haven't seen it before, because I'm just annoying like that. Then, of course, you've got Rec, and the Rec franchise ended with Rec 4 Apocalypse, but this was the Spanish movies. So you had Rec 1, Rec 2, Rec 3, which was a wedding, and then Rec 4 Apocalypse. So Rec 4 Apocalypse, not that great. I didn't mind the ending, but I didn't think it was that great. 1 and 2 are obviously brilliant, and if you are a fan of, found footage movies. Again, though, this one is a little bit different in the sense that they're not going to explore a place that is haunted. This is just a regular TV presenter slash journalist that's going in with some firefighters to it's like because they've been called to the building and they're seeing what a night with a firefighter is like. Like, it's not major, kind of thing. So they're going in, they think they're going into something minor, and it turns out to be their worst nightmare. And I think that's what I like about that one, because it doesn't start off with, oh, we're going to investigate this spooky place. It just starts off with these, very, very benign and calm and chill. And then very quickly it gets into it. And then it's all mayhem and chaos from then on, pretty much. And then Rec 2 starts exactly from where Rec 1 left off. And again, you have your found footage, kind of typical things where, cameras will go wrong, or we'll see something as an audience on camera that other people haven't seen yet, because it's not a camera that's linked to other cameras. So you got that going on. But I think as found footage goes, Rec is pretty decent. But that's your found footage. I mean, there's quite a few others, and your POVs. There's a few others out there, but there haven't been really some that I've enjoyed that much. If there's some that I haven't mentioned and you've really enjoyed, please feel free to put them in the comments. And if you've got this far in the video, please like and subscribe. Well, if you want to, obviously no one's forcing you, but if you want to, feel free to do that. And so now I'm going to move on to a little bit more of what I think is becoming a bit more popular now. Is a lot of the haunted stuff is coming back. So a lot of supernatural stuff, even though they're not huge movies, but they're on Shudder. Now, I don't know if you know about Shudder. This is obviously not sponsored. I mean, I'm a tiny channel. I'm not sponsored by anyone. But I do have a subscription to Shudder because I love all types of horror movies. And I have come across lots of different ones on there. And there's quite a few like haunted ones and like folklore, which obviously goes in with my other content that I do as well on folklore and haunted places, paranormal stuff. And there was one that I watched, which was 458 Forest Drive or Forest Road, something like that. That one. So it was where they were essentially, it's a folklore tied in with supernatural, and it's got a bit of a twist. Easy watching. I wouldn't say it was a 5 out of 5, but I'd give it a 3 out of 5. It was decent. It did have your typical folklore. The town has a scary, dark history. Newcomers come in. They don't know what's really going on. They have to find out what's going on. It's another very famous horror movie trope. Moving on from that one, obviously some great horror movies are coming out from other countries. I mean, obviously Japan have done great horror movies since I can remember. East Asian horror is brilliant. Even now to other parts of Asia, I've watched some really good Indonesian horror, some really, obviously Korean horror, is brilliant. So I kind of had watched so much of the British and American horror that I had to go overseas. Not that I'm in America, but I had to go overseas to find some more. And there's so much like great stuff out there that you wouldn't be privy to if you just stuck to your one type of genre. Now, I'm not a body horror type person, not my biggest thing. But one movie that I did think was really good was this movie, Fresh, which for somebody who isn't a big fan of body horror, this was a really good one. And I think simply because it didn't show a lot of the body horror stuff, but what it alluded to was absolutely, like, just the thought of it happening to you was terrifying. But it was also really well done, really well acted, really well executed, no pun intended, and more original, you know. And that's where we are seeing a bit more of original movies coming out. I mean, it was an American movie, but it doesn't, you know, it was still a great movie. Terrified, which is a Latin American movie, is phenomenal, and I really enjoyed that one. Again, I do like a lot of possession movies, as you know, anything supernatural is my jam. That's my favorite, I'd say. So, not Terrifier with our friend here, Art the Clown. That's more of your bloody gory horror, right? Which again has its theme of some big bad stalking, you know, more like Friday the 13th, Halloween vibe. But Terrified is quite gory though, but it's a possession type thing, and some good possession ones as well. I can't not mention when Evil Lurks. That one was brilliant. Like, again, that was the one I watched before Terrified, and it was the first kind of Latin American movie I watched. I think it came from Argentina, and it was just brilliant. I was like, yeah, this is an excellent done. It was excellently done. And then around the possession line, again, you know, they do have their themes as well. They have their tropes where, you know, there has to be someone to save the day, a hero, in the mix, and the big bad, whatever it may be, wherever the source of the possession is coming from, has to be, you know, vanquished by the hero. And of course, you have a lot of losses in between. And with this one, it was like the losses weren't just minor people. It was quite, it's, let's put it this way, it's not one to start off with, okay? If you're not seasoned, with horror, that is. So that's a good recommendation. So with the possession ones, I also would recommend, obviously, The Exorcist. If you haven't seen that, watch it, you know. The Pope's Exorcist with Russell Crowe. Only movie I've liked Russell Crowe in. I know a lot of people are going to be like, what? But it's just how I feel. The way he took on that man, who was based on a real story and a real man, a real person, the way he took on his whole persona, his mannerisms, this persona of an Italian man, and I'm half Italian, so these mannerisms and body language and little quirks, they were so spot on. He had the language down pat, he had the accent down pat. Like, I was very impressed with that alone. But then I did also enjoy the movie because, again, it's a bit of a find out what's going on. Why is this happening here? Why has it happened before? And then, of course, they need to be the hero to vanquish the big bad. There is a second one coming out as well. So if you are into possession kind of stuff, religious possession stuff, then I would recommend watching that before the second one comes out. I don't know when it's coming out, but those are your possession ones. I mean, obviously you've got Paranormal Activity, but that goes along with found footage, possession, supernatural. Like, it fits into quite a few different of the horror genres. And I personally am not a fan. I've watched them all. Sometimes when I'm bored, I've watched the first one more than once. But it didn't really do it for me. Not really my jam. I kind of saw what they were trying to do, but I felt like they were just jumping on the bandwagon. That's my personal opinion. You know, we've all got our favourites. But yeah, that one kind of, I don't know, I felt like it was trying to do too much in one movie, you know. Like I said, it was trying to be possession, supernatural, found footage, cultish. Like, it was a lot. There was a lot going on. And it was a bit much. But that's obviously one that I know a lot of people are a big fan of. So kind of coming to the end of this, really, because I've spoken about a lot of the ones that I do like and the typical tropes and how they follow those iconic tropes with each other by movie. And of course, you know, art and inspiration is something that's natural. Okay, it's totally natural. And, you know, you're not gonna always get an original movie. And I was so excited for Presents, right, with Lucy Liu, because they were like, it's from the ghost's perspective, it's from the ghost's POV. I thought that's an original concept. Not gonna lie, bit of a let me down. Not because I didn't like the concept, but because the story didn't really give the ghost much. I thought we were going to get a bit more. I don't know, I guess my hopes were too high. Yeah, that's right. My hopes were too high. I was expecting a little bit more of American Horror Story, Murder House vibes. I don't know why, but I was, like, from their POV, but with a lot more involvement from the spirit. So that's one that I kind of thought was going to be slightly newer, slightly different, but ended up being average in my opinion. I mean, I watched it, you know, it was okay, but it didn't blow me away. So yeah, for now, I think this will be like a part 1. I may do a part 2 if I feel like it, or if people request it, because there's obviously a lot more to talk about when it comes to, I've not discussed a lot of the blood and gore ones, probably because I can't go into too much detail on them, but obviously they can get their mentions. And yeah, this has just been a free talking about horror movies and ones I enjoy and the typical tropes of horror and the genres that, you know, I like and that, you know, kind of have something more to them than a lot of ones that get churned out just for the sake of it. So that's why I kind of do recommend Shudder, because there's some like hidden gems in there that weren't big movie blockbusters but are great horror movies to watch if you are a fan. So of course it depends on how much you enjoy the genre, and obviously the subgenres, and which ones are your cup of tea, so to speak. So yeah, I think I'm going to wrap up there. There was one more thing I did think I was going to mention, but it has left my brain and it probably won't come back until after I've finished editing this. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much for being here with me. As always, it is my pleasure. Thank you for stepping into the darkness with me to talk about some scary, spooky things. Any recommendations for future movies? I make movies now. For future videos, please feel free to leave it in the comment section, or also email the email address, which I leave in the description box. I also leave sources in there as well, so I'll list the horror movies I spoke about today, if you want to check them out. And if you have watched to the very end, then you will know why I'm asking you to please also leave a black cat in the comments, if you will. But other than that, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.